All right, what's up, everybody? It's Fast Cars, Fast Money. We have a special treat for you. Not only is it myself, Coop, and Rich, but we got a special guest on the podcast today. Crazy Kev is going to be joining us all the way from Colorado. Say what's up, Kev.
What's up, guys?
What's up, Kev?
Yeah, so Kev's going to be joining us for this podcast and maybe even some future ones. He's a big NASCAR fan. He's been playing NASCAR DFS now for a while. Usually he's winning a bunch of contests. We have a contest between ourselves and usually are Venmoing him the winnings at the end. So I'd pay attention and listen to what he has to say. But if you guys are interested in our thoughts at all, feel free to like the video, subscribe. It really helps us out. Any questions you guys have, drop them down on the comments below, or you can hop over on Twitter. It's at FastCarsFM. We'll be posting the spreadsheet there so you can pull it up while you're making your lineups. But looking at Las Vegas specifically for this weekend, this is kind of how we are approaching this slate. So if we learned anything from last week, don't assume. We all assumed that Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, Martin Truex Jr., like all these big name guys were just going to go out and dominate the race. And, lo and behold, we had William Byron and Chris Buescher, two guys that I wasn't really on. Maybe Byron was strictly a PD play, but I didn't expect him to dominate, let alone win. So just keep that in mind with building lineups for this week. Don't assume that one guy's going to go out there and just lead a bunch of laps, or one guy's going to start deep in the field and move forward. Just because we don't have any practice or qualifying, there's a good chance that they could completely miss the setup. The grid's still set by this crazy formula, so you're going to see a lot of good guys starting further back, and that's going to affect pricing. Las Vegas is an interesting race because usually it's pretty tough to pass. So you're going to see restarts are really, really wild here. That's usually where people are gaining a lot of spots or losing a lot of spots. So if you're watching the race, root for your guy to move forward on the restarts, because once they get kind of single file, they're probably going to be running there until a caution or something. And then also, I can't stress this enough. We're posting this video on Thursday night, but pay attention before the race starts, before they take the green flag on Sunday. We saw last week that Denny Hamlin was starting on the pole and then got a penalty and had to go all the way to the back of the field. A lot of people probably didn't go into their lineups and change it, and Denny never really got back up front, and he burned a lot of lines. So just be paying attention of who potentially might be going to the back and kind of adjust your lines accordingly. But do you guys have any other additional comments of kind of what you're looking at, or you ready to hop in again?
Let's just get to it.
All right, we'll start with you, Rich. Let's break down the 11K and the 10K guys. Who are you interested in this range up here?
Well, we're back to a race with Kyle Busch in it, but this race is a little different with how good the competition is. I mean, this is Kyle Busch's home track. He's generally pretty good here. But as we have right there in the notes, it takes him with NASCAR not having any practice or qualifying, it takes him about half the race before he gets his car where he likes it, and then he can start moving forward and looks to pass more often. But up in this, top 11, 10K range, I'm really looking at Martin Truex Jr. because he's probably the best mile-and-a-half track car at JGR, and he's really great on the long runs, which we see a bunch of here. And then Ryan Blaney, he was really fast here last year. He offers a ton of PD upside, and he has the potential to, get some dominator points as well. He's just had some tough luck with the finishes here. And then Joey Logano, not a fan of Joey Logano, but for DFS purposes, he's a solid play this week.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rich. I think Kyle Busch and Blaney both have a lot of potential to score a lot of points, and both have been really unlucky so far this year. Blaney offers you an extra 12 spots starting back there, so I reluctantly like Blaney this week. I just think, he's got the equipment. He's a good driver, and there's a lot of potential there. You're just nervous with the success he's had so far this year. I like Chase Elliott too. Chase starting eighth, he's always a threat to win it. And I think for a GPP play, or if you think guys like Harvick and Larson and Hamlin, don't get off to a great start, and Chase gets, has a strong restart and gets up there, he could lead you some laps early in the race, earlier rather than later, as well as later. So I don't mind Chase Elliott. And yeah, Joey Logano's had a lot of success at Las Vegas, and he's starting 15th, and he's a fine play as well.
What about you, Kev? Who you like out of the expensive guys this week?
I mean, I think those guys nailed it pretty well. I mean, it's hard to argue against Martin Truex there, but Kyle Busch, hometown race. He's itching to get that first win of the season, so he doesn't have to worry about that like he did last year. So what better place to do it than his home track? He's had a little success, and now he should be able to put it all together. But like Coop said, it's hard to. I wouldn't sleep on someone like Chase either. This week, other guys are going to get a little more attention than him. He's probably going to come into some lower ownership, and it's kind of the races he seems to come out of nowhere, just dominate, and at a race he's standing there holding the trophy. So
yeah, nothing better than holding that trophy at the end of the race there. But yeah, I'm looking at these guys. I mean, these are all good plays. You can't really go wrong. And with the Cup Series being as unpredictable as it is, I'm probably going to have lines, with a variety of different, matchups here. But I think I like Joey Logano a lot. He's the cheapest out of this range. He's won the last 2 spring races at Las Vegas. The spring races are usually run during the day, and then the fall race is usually like Homestead was, a day race in the nighttime. So he has this day race package, dialed in pretty good. So I'm interested in Logano. And then Chase Elliott. I mean, Hendrick as a whole looked really, really good last week, except for Elliott of all people. But I think he should be able to turn it around, and maybe with him not having a stellar race last week, it might lower his ownership, like Kev was talking about there. But I think one thing that a lot of people are debating with this slate is kind of what to do with Kevin Harvick. So I'll start with you, Coop. What's kind of your approach when looking at the pole sitter this week specifically at Kevin Harvick? Is he a guy that interests you, or are you trying to look elsewhere?
Oh, I always have interest in Harvick, but I have the least interest in Harvick when he's starting on the pole. He has had a little bit of trouble whenever he's starting on the pole over the last year even. So, it makes me nervous, but he's always a solid play. Even if he has trouble in the beginning, they'll fix it and he'll still get a decent finish. So the downside isn't as much as if anybody else was starting on the pole, but he could easily not lead any laps. And then, he's not doing what you're counting on him to do. With that being said, for me, I have a little more interest in Hamlin. I think he's got just as good of a chance at getting up there after a little bit and leading a lot of laps, and he starts 6th. So there is a little less downside there. If Harvick starts first and then goes to 6th and Hamlin stays at 6th, it's that much less downside with Hamlin. So I prefer Hamlin over Harvick. And then it's such a struggle. I mentioned some other drivers that have struggled this year, and Matthew Benedetto.
Oh, there goes Coop's sound again.
Yeah, I think what Coop was talking about right there is we'll wait till his audio kicks back in. But Matty D has been struggling this year. I mean, literally, we looked at it. David Reagan is ahead of him in the points, and he only ran the Daytona race.
Contract. So. Yeah.
Okay, Coop, you back there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you back. We lost your audio for a second, but what were you saying about Matty D?
Yeah, just he's been super unlucky so far to the start of the season, and he's looking to turn it around. He's on his contract year. He's really underperformed so far this year, and I really hope for his sake too that he can have a better finish this race, because I think he needs it.
Yeah. What about you, Rich? What are you looking at for the 9K range?
Yeah, I mean, in the 9K range, I really love Matty D. He's had tough luck this year, but it's tough not to play him starting this far back in the field and the equipment he's in. And then I think I like Hamlin more than Harvick as well, like Jason said, just for the sheer fact he's the cheapest he's been in probably 3 years. When was the last time you saw Denny Hamlin at $9,200? It's been forever. So those are probably the two I'm looking at in this range. And then Harvick starting on the pole, but again, we don't have practice, so it's tough to gauge, how good his car is, if the setup's there, if it's not there, how close the setup is. Yeah,
and then what about you, Kev? Are you gravitating towards the the Busch car?
You betcha. Yeah, Kevin Harvick's probably where I'm going to be at. Kind of takes us the same place we were at last year, kind of debating Harvick and Hamlin all season. And whichever one you pick, you're probably going to be wrong on, but I'm leaning more towards Harvick this week, starting from the pole. They're probably going to have that car trimmed out. Should lead a bunch of laps early. As long as he stays fast on pit road, he should be all right. And stay out front, lead a bunch of laps. Shouldn't have an issue there. Like the other guys, I'm pretty big on Matty D this week as well. Starting that far back, it's kind of hard to argue that. His price is still up a little bit. So that should help drive that ownership down. So if you got someone like Harvick or Hamlin, they're probably going to be pretty high in the ownership. Kind of going to make you stand out a little bit so you don't get your line duped a bunch. And he's got to bounce back eventually. And I want to grab him on that week he's bouncing back, not a week or two after he's bouncing back when everyone's back on him. Not going to take down
that's a really good point.
And win money if you're following the trend, not making the trend.
Yeah, it's a good approach. And I will say Kevin Harvick usually does a lot better during these hot daytime slick racetracks, and his car usually is more trimmed out than the field. So it'll be interesting to see how he does up there with clean air. But one guy that we didn't really talk about was Kyle Larson. I probably wouldn't play him in cash at all, starting third, but I think Harvick, Hamlin, and even DeBenedetto are going to grab all the attention out of this range. So I can see Larson coming in really low owned. He basically had the same setup as, if you listen to the broadcast, as Chase Elliott last week, and he looked really, really good. He wasn't even running the wall like Reddick was, and he was staying up towards the front. So if he can bring that speed again, Larson's a guy I'm interested in, but it still might be a little bit too early in the season to pull the trigger on him. I like a lot of these guys in the 8K range, mainly Alex Bowman. I think Alex Bowman has been really fast at all the 1.5 mile tracks, but mainly the 1.5 mile tracks that aren't high tire wear. So Las Vegas doesn't chew up the tires as much as Homestead does. So you're going to see not as much lap time fall off. Guys may be being a little more aggressive on their strategies as far as like when the cautions are coming, if they stay out or come in to get tires. But Hendrick looked good last week. I think Bowman has the sneaky upside dominator potential that Coop likes to talk about. I think he's a sneaky play that if you look at his history, I think he might get some ownership. And then Eric Almirola, I think is pretty much the same play as Matty D. Is just a little bit cheaper, so I'm interested there. William Byron might get an ownership bump because of how strong he looked last week, but starting second, I'm not really too interested there. And then Kurt Busch literally always starts like 7th or 8th, and he always finishes there. So he's always a decent play. But what about you guys? What are you guys thinking about for 8K?
Yeah, I like Alex Bowman as well. I think he's, you got to remember he's in better equipment this year, and he definitely has potential to move up. It was a shame to see him move to the back of the field last week. I think it'll be fun to see him start 9th and see what he can do in that car. I like Almirola more than I like DiBenedetto, strictly for price. I think they have Almirola may even have a little more upside. I think he might be able to finish stronger than DiBenedetto. He's only starting 2 spots higher, and he's $400 cheaper. So I like Almirola in this range too. And then Kurt, like you said, he seems like he's always right around 8,000, 8,500, starting from 5th to 10th somewhere. And I never go out of my way to get him in my line, but I never feel bad if that's where the price ends up. And if that's where your price ends up as you're building your line, no issues with plugging in Kurt either.
Yeah, I agree. I think Alex Bowman will probably end up being a good GPP play because I don't think a lot of people are going to be on him this week. But all the Hendricks cars were really fast last week, and I think they continue that at the 1.5 miles this year. And I agree with you guys on Eric Almirola. He is cheaper, and he's not starting like 5 spots ahead of DiBenedetto. It's only 2 spots next row ahead. So you could potentially fit both of them, but then you limit yourself on your dominator upside. So if you're going to play one of those, I would only play one of those guys. And then no interest in William Byron, starting way too high. Yeah, he had a great race last week, but you got to see more from that, more consistency. And then, like you guys said, Kurt Busch is Kurt Busch. He's consistent.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you guys on that. It's hard to argue against Alex Bowman. There's a period there last year where he was just dominating the 1.5 miles. Hendrick seems to have have it figured out right now, so you kind of figure they're just going to continue doing what they've been doing and just keep getting better at it. Yeah, Eric Almirola, same thing you guys said, but Kurt Busch, I wouldn't sleep on him. Like you guys said, he's always consistent. Had a little bit of bad luck, and he's still been doing, keeping it in there. So if he can put a full race together without any issues, I mean, you'd see him get top 5 this week. And same thing as Kyle's hometown boy. So rumors he might be retiring this year. So you think he'd like to win one more time here at his home track before he hangs it up?
Yeah, those are all good points as well. I like a lot of those guys in the 8K range, and I think they're only going to help your lineup. But what about we'll start with you, Coop, for the 7K guys here with Reddick, Bell, Dillon, Briscoe, Chastain, Jones, and Bubba Wallace himself. What are you looking for out of these 7K guys?
Honestly, this is a really tough range for me. I don't think there's all that much differentiating a lot of these drivers. And I think for me, it might depend on how much salary I have left after I choose who else I'd like in my line and just see where it ends up. They all, Reddick, Bell, Dillon, I think they've all got similar potential and they're all starting right there. So it's sort of tough for me to differentiate in this range. And I think I'm just going to see what I have left and then see how I feel about these drivers then.
Go ahead, Kev.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Coop on this. If I need to get someone from this range, I will. I'm gonna probably try to avoid as much as I can. Austin Dillon, not a bad choice, but doesn't have much upside there. Starting 12th, price is in the upper end of the range. So if I had to go anywhere, I'd probably just go with Bubba or Eric, just because they're a little bit cheaper, starting a little bit farther back, so probably not going to lose you points. So they don't have to do quite as much to get you where you need to get. But if possible, I'd just try to avoid this range.
Yeah, I think in this range, I found myself picking one driver, even though it is like a tough range to decide like who you want. I keep finding myself landing in this area with my last pick. So I like Austin Dillon this week. The RCR cars were dialed in last week. I have a feeling that we're going to see more from this team because of just all the teams basically putting everything together. The bigger teams are selling stuff to the smaller teams just because they're trying to get rid of all their extra stock and whatnot with the new cars they're going to be running next year. And then I do want to touch on Eric Jones. We have him as low interest, but he's starting 29th. I know the 43 car isn't great. I mean, Bubba Wallace had so much trouble in that car for, the 3 or 4 years he was in there. But I think this might be a good time to go with Eric Jones just because I feel like people are going to be off of him and his ownership's going to be a lot lower.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, he hasn't really done much at all this year, which might leave a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths that have played him, that rostered him. I know, me being one of them, I've played Eric Jones a couple of times now, and it hasn't worked out for me. But he's pretty cheap, and he starts, pretty far back in the field, so he should be able to move forward. It's just kind of what that car is capable of. If I had to pick one guy out of this range, I'm actually going to go with Christopher Bell. He wasn't great last week, but I think that might lower his ownership again. And if you look at the equipment, a JGR car is probably the 4th best, JGR car that they have in the fleet there. But still, it's decent equipment, and starting 16th, I just need him to finish relatively around, the top 10, and that's kind of what you're looking for at any of these 7K range guys. And I like the RCR cars too, but I think Christopher Bell might be a good pivot off of those RCR cars. And then I'll start real quick. Oh, go ahead.
I will mention quick in this range too. So say you're building your line and you find yourself with, 83 or 8100 left, and you're playing in a tournament line. Maybe dropping down a couple drivers if you guys feel the same and you're having trouble figuring out which drivers in this range too. Never forget that if you leave a little salary on the table, it can differentiate your lines in tournaments. And so if you feel pretty even on these guys, maybe it's worth dropping down a driver or two and leaving a little salary on the table too. Just wanted to mention that it's a good way to keep your line different and give yourself a better chance at a takedown in a tournament.
Yeah, that's a really good point because a lot of people, when they're building lineups, they usually try to max out their salary. So if you're, say, hey, I have $8,000 left, you're probably going to score all the way up and just play the 8K guy, but maybe it makes sense to drop down a little bit. Or like Coop said, if you like another guy in another range, maybe drop down a little bit to get up to another driver with some additional salary on the table. Looking at the 6K range, there was one guy I think by far that kind of stands out to me. I was kind of surprised that they priced Cole Custer down at 6,500. I mean, he's in the same equipment as Kevin Harvick, and his finish last week was a little deceiving. He was having a great run. I think he was in like 4th or 5th place, and then his tire,
most of the race he was there.
Yeah, his tire blew out and kind of ruined his day. But it actually helps us this week from a DFS standpoint because he's starting further back and he's really cheap. So he's a guy that I'm really interested in out of the 6K range.
I agree. I am more interested in Custer than I am a lot of those drivers in the 7K range. He's just been so unlucky this year, and I haven't seen anything to blame him on either. Every single race, he looks like he's got a great car. He's moving well, he's racing well, and then something happens and he's out of it. And it can't go on forever, right? So for 6,500 starting 20th, I like Cole Custer a lot here. I think Chris Buescher showed that he's got some speed last week. He had a really good race last week, and a lot of people didn't expect it. He got up front and led a lot of laps, so I think he's a fine play here. And I know we have him as low in the spreadsheet, but Corey LaJoie, I'm not too scared of him this week. Starting 32nd, I don't see him falling back any spots, so he's really only got upside. And if he can sneak into the top 20, then he'll pay off that price tag too.
Yeah, I agree. Cole Custer is the play in this range, in my opinion. I mean, he is starting 20th, so if he wrecks, he could kill your line. But there's nobody else around here that offers as much upside as he does, and is in as good of a car as he is. I will touch on Daniel Suarez. I think people are still sleeping on this Trackhouse team. I think this team is a lot better than people are giving them credit for, and I expect this team to start pushing for top 10s here really soon.
Yeah, I mean, I'd pretty much just lock Cole Custer in your lineup. Now you're going to need some value. Go with him. But if you want to go somewhere else, I'd say Suarez is probably the place to go. Like Rich said, it's decent equipment, not great equipment, but he's cheap. Starting 22nd, doesn't have to do all that much. If you don't want to go Cole Custer for some reason, I'd go Suarez.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me out of this range is I'm like, okay, I'm looking at all these guys and I'm evaluating who has the best finishing potential. And I think it's by far, it's Cole Custer. But, there's going to be a lot of people on Cole Custer. So maybe you pivot, you play a line, without him in case he gets into trouble like he has been, the last couple of maybe even all 3 weekends so far. Is there anyone below the 6K range? Are you guys punting at all this week? I'm probably not playing. I think the lowest I'm going to go is Daniel Suarez when I'm building lines. I don't think I'm going to try to play anyone below that. If I have less, if I say I have 5,600 left on the table or something, I'm probably going to go back up and change my lines. That way I'm not getting down to this range. But is there anyone down here that you guys like?
Don't punt. Don't do it.
No, there's nobody under 6K I like. I think with the soft pricing on Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin, you can play a line and not have to punt with these drivers.
Okay, so I guess before we wrap this up, one question I'd ask you guys is, of the two guys in the, I guess maybe all the way down to Denny Hamlin, I guess kind of what two guys are you mainly going to be building around out of the top guns up here? For me, I think it's going to be Joey Logano and either Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson, just because I think Kyle Larson's going to be so low owned, and he's in a fast Hendrick car that I think has some sneaky upside.
Yeah, I agree with Logano. I think Logano for his price is right where it needs to be, and it's a good price. And then I think I might drop down to Hamlin, and that way I haven't built lines myself yet extensively, but that way you got a little more salary to plug in guys like maybe both DiBenedetto and Almirola, and then look at a 6K. I'm not sure how much salary that would leave you, but I think, if you go Logano and Hamlin, I don't think you're losing out too much on those top guys. And I think it might give you a little more salary to pay up for some of those higher 8K range guys that you'd like to see in your lines. And then if I'm not playing either of those two, I think Chase and then Blaney, one of those two isn't a bad place to go either. Again, like we mentioned earlier, I have interest in Kyle and Martin Truex, but they're just expensive. And I think, where we're a little shaky about that 7K range, if you can save a little salary and then pay up for the Almirola, Bowman, DiBenedetto range, and you're able to fit in 3 drivers that way, I think it's a solid way to go.
Yeah, I think in this range, I'm actually leaning towards Martin Truex Jr. I really like this team on the 1.5 mile tracks just because of this car always seems to be great on the long runs, and I don't understand how they do it. They're just better than everybody else when you start getting to like 60 lap, 70 lap runs or whatever. He's just so much better than most of the other cars with the long runs. Now, he could dominate the whole race and still lose at the end just because of late cautions, and which we've been seeing a lot in NASCAR recently. And then I would probably put 2 more drivers in my list. I'm probably going to say Ryan Blaney and then Denny Hamlin as well. I like Ryan Blaney. He's fast. He's in a great car, and he gives you that PD and dominator upside that you need. And then Denny Hamlin over Kevin Harvick just because he's starting those 5 spots farther back, and it's tough to play the pole sitter without practice.
Yeah. What about you, Kev? What are the 2 guys you're locking in?
I'm probably going to be looking at Chase. Like I said earlier, I think a lot of guys are going to sleep on him this week. Looking for a little success himself this year. I know he had a little success there in the duels, but, he wants to get that first win, kind of solidify what he did last year. And, what better way to do it than, win early. And then next guy is going to be Kevin Harvick. I know sit on the pole is a little risky, but sometimes I like to take a little risk and understand the risk that comes with it. If you take him and he has a bad start and he gets shuffled to the back, or, it's going to ruin your day, you're not going to win. But, it's hard to argue with him on the pole. And I think they're going to have that car trimmed out and, try to pick up where they left off last year, since they didn't do what they wanted to with the playoffs when it came down to that. So hard to argue with Kevin Harvick sitting on the pole.
Yeah, I'm probably going to end up with multiple lines and have pieces of everybody just because I can't decide which guy is the best out of the top, those top 8 drivers or whatever.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for the Las Vegas race. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening to what we have to say. And thank you, Kev, for stopping in and being a special guest on the podcast. Feel free to come back any week that you want to give some input. We always appreciate hearing about, who potentially might be a good play and who might not be a good play. But that's going to be it for Vegas. If you guys haven't already, feel free to check out the Xfinity video and the truck video, and we will catch you next week.